Hi, welcome to Tuesday night practice session. We want to look at the way that stepping happens, and in particular that we tend to think, oh, you step with your foot, but the foot is the end of the chain, and you have to step, Tai Chi says, all movement comes from the dantian, so even your stepping needs to be driven by the whole body moving the leg. So I want to start by just looking at the hips, and what's better for that than the good old bear? So as you do the bear, I want you to really focus on the fact that you're turning on top of one leg and then you're turning on top of the other leg. That's this hip joint. Remember, the hip joint isn't out here where you think of your hips. The hip joint is where your leg comes into your pelvis. So you want to be able to rotate on top of your leg, letting the pelvis move on top of your leg, and making the change happen there. This is what we talk about when we say engaging and releasing. So spend a little time feeling the motion. Don't worry about how far you turn, but actually where the turn is happening. So this is a closing hip joint, because if you put your hands, one hand on your pelvis and one hand on your thigh, and you turn to close it, they come closer to each other. At the same time, when I'm doing that on one leg, the others are going further away. Then I turn this way, this is the closing hip joint, and this one is opening. So you want to get this feeling that the two hip joints are doing different things, because this is an important part of how you can step without just hauling a foot out there. So doing the bear for a little bit, feeling, I'm making these motions to remind you to focus on the two different feelings in the two hip joints. And if they don't feel different, just focus on one at a time. Focus on the one that's closing, that you're moving toward, and then the other one that you're moving toward. Get that feeling happening on one side, then on the other side. And then after you've done that a little bit, you can bring your attention to the other side. So now focus on releasing one side, and now releasing the other side, letting this all lengthen and stretch, not taking the leg with you, but actually letting it go. So this is how you get a different feeling in both legs, and it changes in an instant. So, as you know, we can do the bear all day, but let's take a look at it, this motion, in another way that we can separate the actions of the two hip joints. So take a 70-30, and you're going to start in your 70-30. I want you to just sit back to the back leg without changing anything, and then turn on top of the back leg. Come forward without changing, so now you're in the corner, and draw yourself toward the front leg. And so we can do this a bunch of times. This is not how we shift in the form, but it's a way to isolate the movement of the hip joints and try to feel one changing and then the other changing. So really driving one and then the other, feeling how the hip joints actually work, kind of greasing that joint so that it becomes more mobile. Turn, shift without turning, turn without shifting. Shift, then turn. Shift, then turn. And we'll do it a few more times on one leg, and then we'll change legs. So change legs. And it may feel very different on the two sides. We're not nearly as symmetrical as we appear. So turn, then shift. Turn and shift. Doesn't matter how far you turn, it's how you turn, making sure that there's something changing and opening and closing in here. That's the important piece. Shift, then turn. Shift, then turn. Really get familiar with your two hip joints and how they work. Remember that you're turning on top of a ball. The top of your leg is a ball. And that's why we call it a ball and socket joint. So you need to be able to rotate on top of that ball. Just get it greased. Get it working. You can start paying some attention to the one that's letting go, if all this is working for you. Now it's this leg that's letting go. But the important thing is just feeling those hip joints and getting them working. And we'll do it a couple more times on this leg. Separating the shifting and the turning. Make sure you're in a stance that isn't too long or too short so that you can move from one leg to the other comfortably. So if it feels like you don't have enough room, make it longer. If it feels like you're really reaching, make it a little shorter. Put it where you can get a good feeling for what's happening right in your hip sockets. You can use your hands, if that helps, to just feel the changes going on in each of your hip joints. Okay, and take a break. And now I want to look at it in the 70-30 bear. So we're kind of putting the pieces together to really get those hip joints alive and bring our awareness to them. So 70-30, you're going to sit in your front leg, stay in the front leg, turn, 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 and then shift, step out, next one. Staying in the front leg. So now what you're doing is working each hip joint individually. The front one, you're closing, opening, closing. When it opens for a second time, that's your chance to step back and change legs. Close, open, close, open. Step back and change. Close, open, close, open and step back. Shift. So you're putting each hip joint through its paces, giving it a chance to close and open, keeping the weight on that same leg. Turning, turning, turning. You can just let your arms go, but what we're really focusing on here today is the hip joints. Really got to get them working. So feel the changes happening as you open and close. Closing, opening. Closing, changing. Close, open, close. This should feel good. Just let it take you where it takes you. This is one of those things where you're like the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz, and you need a little oil can to get the joint working. So you'll get more turn over time if you use it properly than trying to get more turn and distorting in the process. So just let this feel good and change. Feel those changes happening inside. I'll do this for another couple rounds. And notice that you have to keep the leg stable as you turn. So see, my knee and leg isn't changing as I go through this. It's planted, and then all the turning happens over the leg. Change. Plant this leg. All the turning happens over that leg. So this is nothing new. It's true in the bear. It's true in the separating the shifting and turning. And it's true here. And it's true in the form. You want a stable leg that doesn't change, and then you change on top of it. So take a break and kind of shake out your legs. You will feel this in your hip joints. That's a good feeling. So let's do a first third and pay some attention to just how these joints keep you doing Tai Chi, how they help you step in particular, and how they give you a stable leg to turn on top of. Begin. So I didn't do any talking during that because I wanted you to just pay attention to whatever you were able to pay attention to. But I hope you became aware or more aware of how what we call turning the waist involves the hip joints and how stepping also goes through your hip joints. And I'm going to turn it over to Lee to give you a little lesson in how stepping involves your hip joints.
Great, let's do some more. Yeah, so it's kind of funny because we said that we're going to work on stepping today, and then the first 15 minutes is all about the hip joints. And that's because stepping isn't about your foot. Stepping is about how do you use the waist, how do you generate motion from the dantian that results in the foot moving, but it's not about moving the foot. So let's look at it some places in the first third where we can work on it in relatively constrained circumstances, so we can actually get this feeling. So let's take it right from the very beginning. So right from the beginning, you're starting feet in a V, and what you do is you sit into the right leg, and as you do that, the left knee floats. So you got to get that feeling of the buoyant left knee, of the floating knee. It's as if there was a helium balloon attached to the knee, and as I drop, the helium balloon lifts the leg. So do that a couple times here, just starting in the V. Sink into the right and allow the left knee and the whole left leg to release so that as you sit down, that knee comes up. Stand up and see as you come up, the knee goes down. As you sit down, the knee floats up. Standing back up, letting the knee go down. Sitting down and letting that, like sitting into a bathtub and making the water level rise, let that float the left knee. Okay, one more time. Sitting down into the bathtub, letting the water level of the left knee rise. So that's fundamentally a reaction. As you sit down, it causes the left knee to float. So there's one of those little yin-yang balances. Now let's do the other thing, so that you recognize that, where you lift the left knee. As you sit down, pick up the left heel and the left knee. And do that again. Sitting down, picking up the left heel and the left knee. So when you do that, the whole left side is active. You'll feel it in the foot, you'll feel it in the calf, you'll feel it in the knee. Do that again. Active on both sides. Right, so that's an error in separation of yin and yang, of empty and full. Because when we do that, we've got both sides are active, both sides are doing. We want one side to be the doing and let the other side be the yin to the yang of the doing. So try that a little more. Sit down. As you sit down, totally release the left leg. Allow the left knee to float. This is the helium balloon. And one more time. Sitting down, totally releasing the left leg. So we said we were going to work on stepping, and so far we've taken 20 minutes without talking about stepping at all. Actually, everything we've been doing is talking about stepping. So the stepping happens coming out of this. So do this a little bit more. Sit down, let the left knee buoy. Really get that feeling. As you sit down, the knee buoys. As you stand up a little bit, the knee drops. As you sit down, the knee buoys. As you stand up a little bit, the knee drops. This time, when you sit down, allow the knee to buoy and let that carry the leg to the side. So you're going to watch that motion. It's going to come, the knee comes up, and then it plays out through the leg and ends up with the foot stepping to the ground. So the foot stepping to the ground is the last thing that happens in the sequence. You sit down, the knee buoys, you sit down a little bit more, that floats the knee, and then aim and let that play out through the whole leg. So the stepping is not with the foot. The stepping is from the dantian and the waist, activated by the floating knee, directed by the knee, and playing out into the foot. So do that a couple more times. Sitting down, buoying the knee. Sit down a little bit more, let that buoyancy take the foot and step. And back. Sit down, floating the knee. Sit down a little bit more, displacing the water in the bathtub. The knee floats, the foot steps. One more time. Sit down, floating the knee. Down a little bit more, the foot steps. Now let's do what may be more familiar, which is stepping with your foot, so that you can recognize the difference. That's why we always do this. We want you to do what we're suggesting to you is the productive direction, taking you in the direction of more Tai Chi skill, so that you get that. Then we want you to do the thing which is the external manipulation of the body to make it happen, because that's probably what you do. That's what we all do naively. We're trying to learn the form, and we learn where you put your hands and your feet, and so we put our hands and our feet there. And when we do that, that's an active endeavor. We're actively putting our foot there. That means it's not the result of the changes that you're making inside. It's not a result of balancing empty and full, yin and yang, and so it's not Tai Chi. But it's roughly the right shape outside. So that's what we do. We make the right shape outside. So we start out by trying to give you the feeling that you're really going for, so you can use Tai Chi mechanics to do this. Then we take you back to the thing that is probably what you do, because you learn it from the outside, so that you can recognize that those are different. And then we'll do the Tai Chi way again. So sit down, lifting the knee, and step with your foot. And do that again. Sit down, lift the knee, and step with your foot. When you do that, the bulk of your awareness is going to be in the foot during the step. You sit down, you lift the knee and the heel, and now you think about where you want your foot to go. So do that once more, just so you recognize that feeling. Sitting down, think about where you want your foot to go and place it there. That should feel real different. So let's do the first thing again. Sit down. Sit down a little bit more. Allow that to float the knee. Let that floating play out through the leg. It ends with the foot on the ground. Again. Sit down. Sit down a little bit more. That floats the knee. Ends with the foot on the ground. So as I sit down, this buoyancy comes up, and then it plays out through the leg and ends up putting my foot on the ground. So it doesn't happen instantaneously. It takes a little time for the motion to get through the body from the center. All the turn the waist things are like this. All the turn the dantian things are like this. Because what happens is you make a motion, and then it plays out through the body. So it's not instantaneous. It's not everything locked together and moving. It's not about the effect of moving my foot. So you'll feel that it takes a little bit longer. So do it again. Sit down. Now you have to do something more in order to step. You've got the knee buoyant. So sit down a little bit more, which floats the knee, and now watch that play out through the foot. Once more. Sit down, which floats the knee. Sit down a little bit more, which buoys the knee. Watch it play out during the foot. So that should feel real different as you're doing this. Let's look at it right at the very beginning of the form here, when we go into ward off left. So taking it from the top, sit down, float the knee, sit down a little bit more, let that float the knee more, plays out through the foot, you've stepped, you shift and turn, 50-50, standing up to an unlocked knee position. Allow the arms to float up. Feel your feet as you're doing this. They come back. The arms rebalance. Fingertips awake. Hands come down. Okay, shift to the left. Turn to the right. Let that pivot your right foot. Shift into the right completely. Now turn to the left front corner. And now do the same thing again. Sit down a little bit more, which buoys the knee, and let that play out into the step. And then come into ward off left. So we'll do that some more times. I'll face you so you can see what I'm doing. Beth will be facing the same way that you're facing. So if you get confused, watch her. And just take it from the 50-50 feet parallel place we've just done the opening move. Shift to the left and turn to the right. Shift to the right 100%. And now turn to the left front corner. From here, what you're going to do is you want to sink into the right foot, and notice as you're doing that, that floats the left knee. So just play with that a little bit. You can go ahead and exaggerate and move the body more than we would in the form. Sinking, allow the left knee to float. Sinking, allow the left knee to float. And now this time, let's have that play out into a step. You sink, the left knee floats, and you let that take the foot. And then go ahead into ward off left. Let's do that again. 50-50. Just did the opening move. Shift to the left, turn to the right. Shift all the way into the right foot. Now turn to the front corner. Sit down, float the knee, allow that to make the foot step. Follow it into the 70-30. Again. Shift to the left, turn to the right. Shift to the right. Turn to the front corner, and then sit down. Allow that to float the knee and let that play out into the foot, and then follow it into the 70-30. Now, in our best Goldilocks approach, let's do the bed is too small or the bed is too big or whatever the Goldilocks mistake is. Let's do the mistake and step the foot. So, same thing. Shift to the right leg, turn to the corner, and now without doing anything, just step with your left foot. Notice what that does to the leg. See how straight my leg is? See how severe the angle is in the ankle. So when I did that, I just moved the foot. Back to the first thing. Shift and turn. Shift to the right, releasing the left leg. Turn to the front corner. Sit down and let that buoy the knee and make it step. And then follow it into ward off left. So that should feel really different. So let's take it from the beginning, and we'll look at this and we'll go up to single whip. When we get to single whip, it's going to be the same thing as you come through here. You extend the hook, and now you sit down to buoy the knee, and while you're doing that, you have to turn your waist too in order for the foot to play out. This one is harder. So we've got a little bit more going on. I've extended the hook. I sit down, which buoys the knee. As I'm doing that, I turn my waist and I let my foot step. So let's go up that far from the beginning. Sink into the right, floating the left knee. Sit down a little bit more, let that place the left foot. And go ahead. First one. Okay, on to ward off left. Shift and turn. Shift into the right. Turn to the front corner. Sit down and buoy the knee. Let that make the foot step. Ward off left. Continue. Turn to the right corner. Now you're going to sit down into the right leg, buoy, into the left leg, buoy the right knee. So go ahead and do that and let that play out into the foot. And ward off right. Continuing, roll back, and press, sitting back, and push, onto single whip, turn, shift, then turn, keeping the weight in the back, shift to the right, turn to the right, really make sure the left leg is completely relaxed. Extend the hook, and now in order to step, sit down into your right leg, buoys the left knee. As that's happening, turn the waist so that you guide the foot, and shift into single whip. And take a break. So we're getting more complicated now. The first steps you can do just from the floating of the knee and having that play out into the leg. So we don't have to turn very much, right? So when I do going into ward off left, I've already turned, and so as I sit down and let that foot play out, the foot goes where it needs to. And as I come into ward off right, I've already turned, so as I sit down and let that play out into the knee, the foot goes where it needs to. Now you'll notice if you do this and you don't hold the body rigid, that the hands will change. So I'm doing ward off left here. If I just step, I'll rigidify the body and I'll move my foot. If I instead do this whole sink, float, plays out, while I'm doing that, the hands will start to change already. And then the same thing happens going into ward off right. I come here, I've got my ball of air. If I just step, I hold the rest of the body still and I move my foot. When I step by sinking, allowing the knee to float, then my hands will already start to change, coming into the final ward off position. So in single whip, if you don't turn your waist while you're stepping, you won't step where you want to. So you'll come around here. You'll extend. I just sink and buoy. Well, that's not where I'm going. I'm going over to that side. So as I do that, I have to turn the waist too. I sink and I'm turning the waist. I allow the knee to float and I allow that to play out all the way into the foot. And the astute observer will have seen that when I did that, my hand changed too. It wasn't all held. And that's not deliberate. It's just that when I actually let all the parts be responsive to what's happening in the center here, everything changes. So it all moves. So let's do single whip again. So take it from the push. And sit back and turn, keeping the weight in the left leg. Now shift to the right and turn. Really make sure you're letting go of the left leg entirely, so that when you extend the hook, the left leg is soft. Now sink, buoy the left knee, and turn the waist so that the foot goes where it's supposed to go. And then into single whip. Again, from the push, sit back, turn, shift and turn, extend the hook, sit down, buoy the knee, turn the waist, let the foot go where it goes, and then shift into single whip. So the placement of the foot is the result of that motion playing out through the leg, not something you do with the foot. Let's do it with our foot. So you recognize the feeling. Sit back and turn. Shift and turn. Extend the hook. Now do one of those Hail Mary, hope in a prayer. Throw that foot out there and hope that you got to the right place. Right? That should feel really different. That's a stepping with the foot. Let's go back and do it with these mechanics. Sit back, turn, shift and turn, extend the hook. Okay, sink, which floats the knee. Turn the waist, which places the foot. And shift into single whip. So that should feel really different. There's a couple different ways that you can step in Tai Chi. There's different mechanisms that we use, and so different moves are different. So for example, the stepping coming into white crane that happens with my front foot is different than what we're just doing here. Because as you're doing that one, the whole body is lengthening. At some point that makes the leg move as part of that lengthening. And there's another way of stepping where you create a tautness in the leg and then you release it. We work on that a lot in the hero stroll, where we come forward and we allow the rear leg to stretch, and then we release it, buoy the knee, and let the foot step. So the initial motivation for those steps is different from this down in the bathtub floats, sink in the bathtub a little bit more, let the water raise and have that play. But any of those require that you're using the knees to actually aim where the foot and leg go. So you got to get this thing of using the knee, floating, and letting that place the foot in order to do the other stepping mechanisms of stretching and lengthening, or lengthened and releasing. We use all of those in the Tai Chi form, but this is the first basic one, and no surprise, there it is right at the start of the form. Of course, the one that we do at the start of the form is the one that you need to have in order to do all the others. So we're going to spend our time today on that first one, and then, with time, we'll look at the others eventually. So let's do this from the very beginning again. Up to single whip, and I want you to really pay attention to that floating buoyancy and then the playing out in the leg. So from the top. Sink into the right, float the left leg. Sink a little more, let that buoy the knee and place the left foot. First one. Continue. Shift to the right. Turn to the corner. Sink, buoy the knee, let that place the foot, follow it into the 70-30. Continue. Turn to the right corner. Sink, buoy the right knee, let that place the foot, follow it into the 70-30. Okay, on to single whip. Sit back and turn. Shift to the right. Make sure you're really in the right. Turn to the right. With the left leg completely released, extend the hook. Now sink, buoy the knee, turn the waist, let that place the foot. Up into single whip. Great. Embrace tiger? Okay, so Beth will now explore this in Embrace Tiger.
Okay, so let's look at this in a really difficult step like Embrace Tiger. A couple aspects to it, but you might be wondering, first we talked about the hips for stepping, then we talked about the knees for stepping. Well, it's all related, and this is really going to show you why you can't get the knees to work if the hips aren't changing. So let's do it once and just observe what it means to step for that big step for Embrace Tiger. And remember, you're going to, if this is front, you're going to your right rear corner. So let's take it from the top, sitting down, hands crossed, and begin. Hands drop, waist turns, weight shifts, and sink, step, and complete the move. Take a break. Let's do it again. Sitting down and go. Arm and leg move together, stepping, big step. Final posture. And once more. Begin. The right leg is free, the knee is buoyant, the waist turns, the foot steps. Final posture. So, one of the first things you want to look at is the path that the leg takes. If you're using your foot to do the stepping, like Lee was talking about with those other moves, where you just move the foot, notice the path that it takes. So if you do this again, you sit into your left leg and just step with your foot. Forget about all that other stuff and just think, oh man, this is such a big step. I just got to haul my leg out there and put it wherever it goes. So that's stepping with your foot. And it's very unlikely you will end up where you want to be when you do that. One of the qualities of stepping that way is that if you think about my center line, when I step with this foot, I'm taking it away from the center. Things are opening and spreading across here. So you can do this and even just put your hands there on either side of your sacrum and feel what happens when you step with your foot. It's a little like splitting yourself apart. And it's very hard to do that and have an empty leg. It just gets in the way. So the other way to do...
This is a little bit personal, but you'll actually feel your butt cheeks come apart.
So Lee just said, this is a little personal, but you can actually feel your butt cheeks coming apart. And so, check that out. Put a hand on each cheek and feel how you're splitting yourself like a wishbone. You're taking your butt cheeks apart. So, there's a better way, right? And the better way is that you actually make this axis of your center line and you rotate around it, letting the side that you're going to step with release and hang and move toward the center line. So you've got the two options. One is that your butt cheeks split apart. The other is that they that the right one rotates closer to the left. So you come closer to your center line there. So just do this motion with me, where you're 50-50, and go ahead and put your hands back here so that you get a visceral experience of it. Sit onto your left leg. Now you've got an axis that's running through your center, and start turning, releasing the right leg. Feel how it moves towards you. The knee, as you sit down, you're like displacing water in the bathtub. The knee is floating and buoyant, and that whole side can rotate. It has to rotate in the hip joint, and that helps the knee float and bring the leg closer to your center, bring your butt cheek closer to the center so that your knee is floating, and then you can follow it. So you can think of the motion being like this, that the first motion releases this, the hip joint changes, the knee becomes floating, and then you're turning your waist just like we did in single whip. You turn your waist, and it plays out into the foot. So that's the feeling that you're looking for. So try doing that with that shape in mind. So you sit into the left. As you do that, the right is releasing, it's hanging. The knee is becoming buoyant. And as you turn your dantian, you can step. So now you might say, yeah, but I'm not getting my 70-30 where I want it to be. That actually can happen anywhere. It may be that when you did the opening move, your foot didn't go where you thought that it should go. Work with it like this, and then stop and figure out where you need it to go, and maybe your idea of where it goes is not where Tai Chi takes it. So really look at this and let this be the determinant. Now, this is a very big move, this Embrace Tiger. When we first learned it, the senior student who taught it to us said, well, this move is basically impossible, nobody can do it. And we were like, okay, well, cool. I won't say it's impossible and nobody can do it. I will say that it's really difficult. So don't focus on where you end up with your foot so much as how you get it there. Because just like with the Tin Man and the oil can, if you don't oil it in the right place, it's never going to get there. So you can say, I didn't land where I want to be, but if you kind of work it little by little, it will become more available to you. And, I don't always hit it just right, but it gets better. So take a look at what it takes to get it to move rather than the end product. So releasing, letting that move toward you, the hip joint is open, the knee is buoyant, you step, shift, and complete the move. Now you may not be where you want to be. So the next move is to sit into your back leg and do another grasping sparrow's tail. Notice what I just did. I just let my foot move when I turned my waist. So if you end up in a 70-30 that isn't a good one for you, you can just let it follow the motion of the body to a place that's better. But at least you will have gotten it there in a more Taiji way, and you will move it to the right place in a more Taiji way. So stick with that. Let's do it again. And begin. Releasing, knee floats, body turns, step, and complete the move. And then you can stop and check it out and see where you ended up. The way to check if you've gotten your feet in the place that is appropriate, I'm going to follow this line back to the other foot, turn that foot so that the 2 feet are parallel. I should be 45 degrees from the wall with my feet more or less shoulder width. That's what you're looking for. So that's how you measure it. More importantly, notice that the foot goes down out there. I'm not doing this to get 70-30. I see people do that, and it may seem like you're getting the width, but you actually don't end up in a better place. So do give yourself the opportunity to discover where this leg goes by doing this. Turn the waist and send it out. It's not a step behind you. One of the clues that you're stepping behind yourself is if you want to put the ball of the foot down first. So if you step behind yourself, it wants to go down on the ball. That's the splitting the wishbones, sending the foot out somewhere that you're convinced is going to be a big enough step. So notice that feeling. If you do this, it's with the foot, and notice where my dantian is relation to my leg. This other way of doing it, where you release all of this, let the knee become buoyant. Okay, my dantian's here. It's going to turn a little bit more as I step out, but I'm stepping this way, not back there. So give yourself the opportunity to really explore where the 70-30 wants to land, and forget about just hauling that foot there. Do this action that releases at the hip, floats the knee, the dantian turns, it plays out into the foot. Heel first. Let's do it again. Begin. Turning toward your center line. Arm will help you keep your balance as you step and complete the move. And then check it out. If your foot is pointing still to the wall, well, once the heel goes down, you can turn the foot a little bit. So as you do this, if what you find is, oh, okay, I got my heel out there, but see where my toe is pointing? It's pointing to the wall. I can just do that. And now it's actually pointing to the corner, and I can work with it from there. But at least I'm aiming to the corner, and I'm not just falling completely short because my heel came down and pointed my foot at the wall. So a little bit of awareness. Once the heel goes down, make sure that you know where the toe is and that it's pointing away from the wall. Again. Sitting down and go. Hip is released, knee is buoyant, waist is turning, heel goes down, toe points to the corner, complete the move. Now, when the arm swings up, this could, it's one thing to look at how the foot goes, but it's the whole body, like Lee was talking about. Once you get something buoyant, everything's going to go into motion. One of the things that can make this move more difficult than it is trying to put your left arm up in a place that is going to split you to the left side. So, if I'm facing you, and I do this arm just swings up where it needs to be to support my motion. But it's very tempting to do something like this, where I reach with this back arm as it's swinging up. And that's going to encourage that splitting the wishbone feel. So do this again. And pay attention to, right away, I'm turning. As that arm swings up, it's swinging up out there. It's not swinging up behind. So as you do just this first piece, let this arm swing up naturally wherever it's going, because it's connected to your dantian, which is turning. Let's watch Lee do it again. So, see, his fingers are over here. And as he keeps going, they're folding in already, and they're coming with him here. It's just like any other brush knee. And, the difference is that the palm turns up as it crosses your thigh. But all that other stuff, let it be with you. Let it ride with you. You might have learned this. There's a square form, round form set of details. We learned it where the arm folds up and over as you're stepping. Then Ben Lowe came and made us spend a lot of time with our arm up in the corner like that. And so you might have learned it that way. But either way, I want you to get this feeling of roundness now. So even if you learned square form, let's look at it in the round quality, which is that it's folding over to help you make that step. So it swings up and then it's folding over, and ideally the fingers arrive as your heel arrives. And then it's just a straight shot forward. So pay some attention to that. Let's do it again. Sitting down and go. The arm is swinging up, your foot is moving, your dantian is moving. These two arrive, hand turns over at the end. So let's put this all together. Let's do a first third that actually goes up to the single whip in the corner after Embrace Tiger. So just a reminder, after you do Embrace Tiger, we're going to do another version of Grasping the Sparrow's Tail, and we'll end up in single whip to the other corner. So let's take it all the way to there, and that gives us a bunch of opportunities to step with our empty legs, buoyant knees, and freed hip joints. Begin. Now, look for that feeling of releasing the leg, the knee is buoyant, and that's going to be how you make the step play out through the whole body. You get to work your hip joints without having to step. All on the left leg, turning to the right on the right leg, letting the left leg go. Letting it play out through the leg. And you can watch it happen with this step as well. Knee floats. And again, floating knee plays out to the foot. And watch how the dantian helps you drive your foot where it needs to go. And keep going. Turning, releasing, knee floats. And if you didn't get your foot where you want it to be, let it come back with you to a new place. And one more time through with single whip. Waist turns to the right. Waist turns to the left. It keeps turning to the left. It helps you place the foot. And hold it there a moment. Take a break. So that's a bunch, starting with emptying the hips, releasing the knees so that they can float, letting the motion play out. That's one of the ways that it makes the foot land on the heel so that you can then shift the rest of the way. Stick with this. Let where your feet land tell you something about what's going on, and use that to adjust so that you get your feet where you ultimately want them, rather than just hauling the foot somewhere that you want it to go, where it may or may not actually go where you want it. So we'll close for now. Stick around and say hey, and join us again next week.